Thanks for joining me. Dave, you read about what happened up in the University of Missouri where the president resigned because of some racial activities that took place up there. Look, I love Missouri. I was born in Kansas City, Missouri, graduated from high school in St. Louis. I'm a big fan of the University of Missouri. I won the state track championship up at Missouri 3 years in a row. Was offered a scholarship to the University of Missouri, considered going to medical school at the University of Missouri. And so I've got great ties up there, a fine university of which I've been very fond. What happened was there was protests because there was some racial activity where a swastika appeared on the side of a building, and apparently some young man said that his window, when he drove by, that a couple of students, male students, screamed racial epithets at him, and they should have been outraged. But rather than taking their protest to some group to talk about it, they started immediately saying, well, this is going on. We want the head of the University of Missouri president. President, pretty good guy, been raising money up that way, not involved in anything that reflect itself on racial activities to the negative at all. So the football team jumps in. All the black members of the football team say, we're not going to play this weekend. They're supposed to play Brigham Young this weekend. And I think Brigham Young is coming to the University of Missouri. I follow Missouri now, too, because they're in the Southeast Conference down where my LSU team plays. And so we follow Missouri. They are a player in determining the Southeast Conference championship. So they're going to play Brigham Young. The 30 African-American football players boycott. We're not going to play. Unless the president resigns because of what happened to these several kids, we're going to boycott. Here's a university with 30,000 students or more. No indication of this president being insensitive at all on a whole host of politically correct matters, on racial matters. And so they boycott, and it becomes a huge uproar up that way. And more people join the football players' cause. The president resigns. President resigns. It's just like, I can't put up with this, and it just seems like it's out of control, something I can't deal with. I wonder where the backbone was of the administrators backing up this president. I think the thing is ridiculous. You're going to let your football team, and it comes down to money, you see. If Brigham Young doesn't play University of Missouri, if they called off the game, then it would cost the university $1 million. Well, the profit last year for football, I know they're a Southeast Conference power, but the total football budget was about $3 million in profit. So that means they're going to give up about 1/3 of their profit. Well, here's how I would handle it. Any player that didn't show up for that protest, I would have said, fine, that's your right. We have freedom of expression here. Now you're going to lose your scholarship. You're off the football team altogether. That would have been the right response, in my opinion. Missouri's had so many problems. This whole thing in Ferguson, Missouri, there were two sides of that story. I lived about 30 miles from Ferguson when I went to high school. Dated a girl over there in Ferguson. Drove through that area all the time. It's a nice community, but one thing got out of hand. Now, there was a lot of misinformation. Remember the Michael Brown allegations that don't, hands up, don't shoot. Of course, that never happened. That never happened. That was just a way to motivate and incinerate the discussion up that way. So Missouri's having some tough problems. I don't think you respond by running away and you're throwing your hands up. The president had enough. He did so. I think it was a mistake. I would have fired all those football players so you've lost your scholarship. And then, okay, if there are issues you want to discuss, we will discuss those issues and try to make improvements if it makes sense. But to run the president out over something like this, I personally think doesn't make good sense whatsoever. I share that with you as someone who's from up that way, who follows Missouri closely. I think this whole incident is just, it does great damage to the administration. Look, I'm not a fan of many higher education institutions in terms of their governance. I've got some down here that, quite frankly, for reasons of not teaching our kids better, ought to probably hit the doorway. But in this case, I think the administration was wrong in even accepting that president's resignation. We got to do better than that. We can't tear apart our country in this vein to be so. And what was also interesting, if you saw it on CNN or other news sources, the leader of the protest was out of the journalism department saying the press couldn't come in. We don't want any freedom of speech here. You get out of here. This is our protest. So the free speech journalists that are taught in the journalism department at University of Missouri say, we don't want the press anywhere around. Just the whole thing just was a shambles, a real blight on the University of Missouri. Their president should not resign. That's my opinion. I'd like to hear from you. I'll be right back after this message.